Hi, welcome to Danny After Dark. If you're new here, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss a notification or a new episode. Tonight, I'll be featuring the case of Rodney Alcala. He's more commonly known by his nickname, the dating game killer. So let's find out more. Let's go ahead and dive on in. Rodney James Alcala was born on August 23rd, 1943 in San Antonio, Texas. Rodney's father abandoned the family, so his mother was forced to raise the children alone. So she relocated to Los Angeles, California. Rodney then went on to join the United States Army in 1960. It was there he served as a clerk. In 1964, he suffered a complete and total nervous breakdown and was diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder by one of the military psychiatrists. He was then discharged from the military on medical grounds. Rodney then went on to school and actually graduated from UCLA School of Fine Arts. Well, now we get to 1968. This is where Rodney committed his first known crime. What he did was he lured an 8-year-old girl, yes, an 8-year-old girl, into his Hollywood apartment. Well, the girl was later found in the apartment. She had been raped and beaten with a steel bar. But Rodney was able to escape before he was caught. So where did he end up? Well, he fled to New York and actually started to attend school at New York University, but he had to use an alias to do so. The alias he used was John Berger, and it was there he actually studied film under Roman Polanski. During the summer months, he obtained a counseling job at a New Hampshire arts camp for children. Of course, he had to use an alias to do so. Well, in 1971, 2 campers were at the post office and happened to notice an FBI Most Wanted poster on the wall. When they noticed this poster, they saw Rodney Alcala's face on it. These campers notified camp directors immediately, and Rodney was arrested and extradited back to California. But by then, the victim's family relocated to Mexico, and her parents refused to allow her to testify at Rodney's trial. Well, the court was now unable to convict him of rape and attempted murder without their primary witness. Prosecutors were forced to have Rodney plead guilty to a lesser charge. So he ended up serving only 34 months in prison and was then paroled in 1974. Less than 2 months after being paroled, yes, less than 2 months, he was arrested again for what? Violating parole. This time, he provided marijuana to a 13-year-old girl, and this 13-year-old girl also claimed that he had kidnapped her. Rodney was sentenced to serve jail time again, but was paroled early after serving only 2 years. 1977, Rodney was hired as a typesetter by the Los Angeles Times. This was during the coverage of the infamous case of the Hillside Stranglers murder. During this time, Rodney convinced dozens of young women that he was a professional fashion photographer, and he wanted to photograph them for his, quote, portfolio, end quote. Most of the women in these photos remain unidentified. Police fear that some of the women in these photos that they can't identify may be additional victims of his. 1978. Rodney, by now, had killed 2 women. But he went on to apply and was accepted as a contestant on the show, The Dating Game. This is where many people know him from. The clips of him from the show are on the internet, are on YouTube. You can find them yourself. How was he able to get on? He was a convicted rapist and a registered sex offender. Host Jim Lange introduced him as, quote, a successful photographer who got his start when his father found him in the darkroom at age 13, fully developed. Between takes, you might find him skydiving or motorcycling, end quote. Well, Rodney won. He won a date with the Bachelorette. Her name, Cheryl Bradshaw. However, Cheryl later refused to go out with him because she found him, quote, creepy, end quote. Jed Mills, he was an actor who actually sat next to Rodney on stage. He was Bachelor number 2. Later described Rodney as, quote, a very strange guy, end quote, with, quote, bizarre opinions, end quote. June 20th, 1979. Robin Samso was a 12-year-old girl from Huntington Beach, California. Well, she disappeared. Her decomposing body was found 12 days later in the foothills of Los Angeles. Police later found her earrings in a Seattle locker that was rented by Rodney Alcala. He was known for his cruelty to his victims. He would sexually assault them and he would strangle them until they lost consciousness. He would wait and then revive them and would sometimes repeat this process over and over again before finally killing them. In 1980, Rodney was tried, convicted, and sentenced to death for Robin's murder. However, his conviction was overturned. It was overturned by the California Supreme Court. This was due to the trial judge allowing the jury to hear about Rodney's other rape and kidnapping convictions. 1986, Rodney was convicted for a second time and again was sentenced to death. However, his conviction was overturned again. This time, it was because a witness was not allowed to support Rodney's contention that the park ranger who found Robin's body had been, quote, hypnotized by police investigators, end quote. What the heck? In 2003, while prosecutors prepared for the third trial, they learned that Rodney's DNA, which was now being sampled under a new state law over his objections, matched semen left at a rape murder scene of 2 women in Los Angeles. Another pair of earrings found in Rodney's storage locker matched the DNA of one of those 2 victims. Well, as DNA progressed, now we get to 2004. More DNA evidence matched, and this led to an indictment for the murders of 4 more additional women. Jill Barkum, 18 years old. She was killed in 1977. Georgia Wickstead, 27 years old. She was bludgeoned to death in her Malibu apartment in 1977. Charlotte Lamb was 31 years old when she was raped and strangled in El Segundo in 1978. And Jill Parento, 21 years old, killed in her Burbank apartment in 1979. In 2009, Rodney finally stood trial. Now he was on trial for all 5 counts. This time, he wanted to act as his own attorney. He spoke in a rambling monotone voice and constantly told jurors that he was at Knott's Berry Farm when Robin was kidnapped. However, he offered no kind of defense in any of the other 4 murder cases. As part of his closing argument, Rodney played a portion of Arlo Guthrie's song, Alice's Restaurant, in which the protagonist tells a psychiatrist he wants to kill. Well, how did this play out? Rodney was convicted on all 5 counts. A surprise witness during the penalty phase of the trial was Rodney's first victim. In March 2010, Rodney was sentenced to death for a third time. Remember, all of those photos of the young women Rodney took years before? Well, police released those photos. What they wanted was people to identify them. If they were one of the women, to come forward, or if family saw them in the photo and they'd been missing, to come forward and identify them. Although Rodney was convicted of only 5 murders, it is estimated he killed up to 100 women. While in prison, he has written You, the Jury, a 1994 book in which he asserts his innocence and points to a different suspect. He has also filed 2 lawsuits against the California penal system for a slip and fall claim in that they failed to provide him with a low-fat diet. It's unbelievable. Rodney continues to maintain his innocence. Currently, he remains on death row at San Quentin State Prison. And that is the case of Rodney Alcala. Thank you for sticking around for another episode of Danny After Dark. Again, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss a notification or a new episode. Do you have a question or a comment about this case? Have you seen the footage on YouTube of Rodney on the dating game? Leave a comment below. Let's be interactive. Do you have a suggestion for a case that you would like me to cover? Well, leave it down below, and you may see it covered in a future episode. Until next time, remember, we don't live in darkness. Darkness lives in us.